This is our 5th workshop in the Dash Workshop series. All of them have been recorded, as this one is now. They can all be viewed at z.umn.edu/dash events. Today we are focusing on digital pedagogy, and I am happy to have teamed up with Alex, Lauren, and Farhad from various departments at the University of Minnesota. And they're going to talk to you about some of the philosophies behind it and some of the tools that you guys can use. And there has been some pre-workshop work that I'm excited to see, some Flipgrid videos and things like that. So without further ado, I will hand it over to them.
And do we need a microphone? This microphone in particular? Okay. Sorry, there's a lot more technology in here than I think, at least I'm used to working with. I'm Alex Fink. I am a doctoral student in the School of Social Work at the University of Minnesota. And I am also, I do a lot of work with young people, specifically around learning really complicated things like leadership and social entrepreneurship and doing research to take political action to make social change in their communities. So I came to pedagogy through actually my undergraduate experience when I realized the difference between teachers where I actually felt like I learned something and the classes where I brought my laptop after the first day of class so that I could do other things in class. And I've come to digital pedagogy only in the last couple of years as I realized, teaching in my own classes, that technology actually could do a lot to build on the work that was already going on in class, and that I could use the technologies that students were using in their everyday lives to make pedagogy and learning work better. So that is why I'm here and really excited to be here.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and hi to everybody at a distance. My name is Lauren Marsh, and I'm an educational technologist in academic technology support services here at the university. And Alex challenged me to say something about how I arrived at this intersection of education and technology. Well, it was a while ago that I was finishing up a doctorate in English literature, late 18th, early 19th century British literature, and I was hired as a writer for educational courseware, which is the first time I started thinking about shaping an educational environment online, and I used that experience. Then I was able to leverage that to come back to the university and do the work that I do here. I think we call that a trapdoor profession, where you're walking along, you think you're going one place, and you kind of fall through the floor and find yourself elsewhere. And this is Farhad, who has a very long and interesting career here at the university.
Hi, I'm Farhad. We're with ATSS. Just like Lauren, my career or trajectory has been very twisted and long. I started out in genetics, and actually I did my graduate work here. Twisted and long. And then drifted into computer science, and I wrote software in industry for a bit, and then I came back to the U, and I wrote software at the U for, 15 years, and time for a change. Here I am at academic technology and pedagogy.
And what Farhad is not demonstrating for you today is the Dash DigiPed slide, which is a new dance that we've invented. And actually this link will take you to the slides that are up here that also have a lot of notes in them. So if you want to link outward, you can click. We have a bunch of videos in there and resources that you can use, either as you're going today or in the future.
All right, let's get me hooked up here. Here we are. All right, so we are going to start with a discussion about this tool, Flipgrid. And let me actually get out of presentation mode here and just show you the interface. And folks, I can see you. I can see that a lot of you aren't in here yet. So I'm going to suggest that, first of all, introduce yourself to some folks around you. What's that? No, I was thinking my friend Amy. Introduce yourself to some folks around you. Get into groups of about 3 people. And if you haven't yet clicked that green button, I want you to do that and just say hi, since we're going to be talking about We're using this as a case study about tools and their affordances. So in order to do that, you know, it will serve you well to just click a button and get in there and get a little familiar with the tool. And if you don't have a device in front of you, you're going to make friends with the person right beside you. So you just navigate to that link up there. Can you all see it? Or else it was sent to you in an email. So again, just take a moment to say hello. And I want to know that you've got that link up there. And then I will navigate back to the discussion question, which you will have 10 minutes for. You're going to spend 10 minutes simply talking about how might you use this tool. And we want you to record examples, specific scenarios that you come up with in a spreadsheet. I'll give you the link to that spreadsheet. Any questions then?
I can't see the letters after flipgrid.com.
Yes, that's # D2BA9229. And did you get,
Yeah, I probably got the email.
yeah, okay, like a clickable link in there?
Anyone else having trouble getting it? Okay, good.
Okay, so can I talk without my camera? My camera's not working.
That's a good question. Let's see if you've got a camera.
Well, the camera actually was broken out here last week.
I don't think it will be bothered if your camera's broken, but you need. Is it?
The opposite direction, like further out.
Let's see if we. They might. Maybe they do.
Yeah, so if you are. Nope, I still don't hear about
Very good. Right. Right.
But I have been utilizing a word cloud a few times during a particular class in 1301 in which we concentrate on two different documents which have two completely different tones but generally the same sort of perspective. In the main class, they found that they started using Chime in on a regular basis, trying to make sure that the students are engaged and paying attention and the like. And of course, that has the challenges where time feels somebody who doesn't have access to a laptop or to a cell phone which texts when you've already had the phone, we can have access to something
Did you get more in there, Lauren?
Let's see.
I see a bunch more in there now.
Oh, good. Let's just refresh.
Oh, yeah, there's loads of books.
Great. All right, everybody. So again, just want to orient you. I guess they're discussing. So as you start creating these scenarios together, please record them in this document, and we'll take 10 minutes from now. Yeah, they should be having a discussion and generating some scenarios.
So if you haven't yet, take what you have just tried out with Flipgrid and group with one or two other people that are near you, maybe the people that you're helping do the technology piece we just did, and talk about the question that Lauren has up here: how might you use Flipgrid as a tool for learning, and why? And what we're asking you to do is take about the next 10 minutes to talk about this, and then in that spreadsheet that we have there at that link, to record some of the responses that you come up with. So we're creating together a document that will have the responses that we come up with as a whole group. Let us know if you have questions, and we'll come around and help.
I don't think I have access.
To the document?
I have access to read it, but I can't type it.
All right, let's make sure that's editable.
Make it open to the world?
Yeah, I did. Or you did.
I had to change something so the off-campus people could get into it. It should be good now. Try it again. No, I just changed it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make it really open.
Yeah, just to that guy forum, and then everyone would just type the same thing. You know, or they would feel like the one person had typed their things and they couldn't. They had to do something different. And this like, if they didn't watch the other people's videos and just get their own initial reaction. Sorry.
Indeed. Okay. We have a permissions problem. We are fixing it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, when Farhad made it said anybody could edit it.
Right. It looks like some people are able to add stuff now. Is it working for anyone?
I think if all of us are trying to add a line too, then it's just overriding.
It totally does, yeah. Just drop down.
Mine worked. So
Okay,
that's
great.
fine.
I
It's
don't
not
know
all
why.
matters.
Right.
I'm just picking like random lines.
But it looks like the first line got duplicated. In other words, the first response is not the first.
Okay. For now, don't worry too much about organizing the responses. If you, yeah, but if they.
That question used to be something else,
Oh.
and now it got.
Okay. Well, we'll ask Justin to change that part back. Sorry about that. Justin, does that first question get changed?
No, I mean, if the record, does it just record the video for that session, or does it record videos for on a more permanent basis?
Which one? We'll find out. But it records, that like a class session.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of depends on the contract you make with your students about where their videos are going. And they can be private or they can be public.
Alright, well, I mean, I guess if like you had that available contract, and not only, I didn't teach that class multiple years, then if you would allow people like kind of,
You haven't
have
shown
that
the
sort of
video of what it looks like.
balance of full work there,
Yeah.
and at the same time, it gives people sometimes, the universal self-determination is for themselves. No. So,
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Let's take 2 minutes to wrap this up.
you go into a class, have the class submit questions. Because we do have Google Forms, but you have no connection to who the question was, or you can, talk to someone afterwards if their question was something you couldn't address. You'd be like, oh, hey, I saw I just had this question. Give me 5 seconds. Yeah. Well, it'd be creepy because you'd be like, oh, that's right, I recorded my face and told you my name.
No, of course, the downside of that is that you also have to make sure that they're okay.
Like anonymous Grizzly.
Well, not only something living digitally, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, some people have like
Okay, we got a lot of great responses in here.
they realize that they're going. Oh, that's the other thing.
Wait a minute, where do we want to be here?
Also, exists that if they
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this experience. First of all, I'm going to show you real quickly the administrator's point of view and say a couple words about Flipgrid. This was created here at the University of Minnesota, and for that reason, folks at the University of Minnesota can get a free account. And as you notice, to use it, if I share a link with you, you do not need an account in order to respond, which means the barrier to entry is very low. This is a wonderfully easy tool to use. And just want to point out to you, so this is how I create a question, add a question. Now I have a limited number of characters. It was 240 characters that I get to use in here. So you have to be extremely concise with the question. And in order to share this, all I do is grab that link, and I can integrate that link into my Moodle site, or I can send it out as an email. And when I scroll down below, again in the administrator's point of view, I can see when you added this. I can send an email to specific people, which is a pretty cool feature. I can also grab a link to an individual. What is Flipgrid in its singular? An individual flip grid? I don't know. Anyways. So what was the experience of using this? Any thoughts? Easy, good. Like to hear that. Very, very cinchy. And this is, for all its simplicity, this is actually an interestingly complex tool, I'd say. I mean, it foregrounds affective components of education and sharing, because I hear and respond to your voice. Of course, I see your face. There's a performative component to this. So it's a terrific tool if you want people practicing maybe using languages, or practicing public speaking, or making presentations. And of course, it delivers content. So as all of you were coming up with specific scenarios for using the tool, applying it in a learning environment, I imagine that you were thinking about these different components of the tool in order to meet your learning needs. Anybody want to share a specific one that they came up with in here?
I talked about using it maybe as a pre-class assessment. So I'm a librarian, so we would go into a class and sometimes we'd want to find out ahead of time what their questions were, and we'd do a survey. So then you get a Google form, but you can't connect it to anyone. So if you had them record their faces, one, they would get to see what their co-students also found to be questions, and then we would also be able to follow up directly with people who maybe we couldn't address their question in class.
Yeah, excellent. Did others of you think about this in terms of assessment? Like, did you come up with scenarios that you would want to be able to assess as part of the teaching environment? Probably a formative kind of assessment, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking instead of asking for students to write like a paragraph response to the readings, they could record a video or something like that, and then everyone else could see what everyone else is thinking, and sort of less pressure sort of situation than like on the spot in a classroom.
So allow people to get their thoughts together. They can script, they can draft, whatever they have to do to feel comfortable making that public statement. Yeah, that's a great point. And Rebecca.
There's a part of me that is intimidated with recording myself, and I know that definitely is part of the faculty, and this might be a low barrier way for everyone to get used, because you see all the examples. You're not just seeing your own face and how your own voice is heard. You hear others and you see others, and you know, in other words, it might get you more comfortable to using these types of tools in other instances as well.
Right.
Well, one thing I was sort of thinking about is how there are some students who are generally not very comfortable talking in a class when they're in the wider group, but they're sometimes better with doing it when they're in small groups. So if you want to have, say, a discussion which involves the entire class, but you want to make sure that everybody can be able to participate without feeling intimidated, this might be a methodology to do that. Although, I've also put in a few limitations that might be present in the comments, if that's something.
What kind of limitations would you want to keep in mind here?
The first big limitation is the potential access issues. I mean, we sort of take it for granted these days that everybody has access to either a laptop or a cell phone that has recording quality, but from my experience, not everybody does, or they're not, that they might be having technical issues with the device they're currently using. So that's one big problem. The second problem is that obviously, this allows for a more personal recording experience, and a personal sharing experience, but people might feel a little awkward actually sharing the video with other people. So you have that problem as well, especially, dealing with whatever hang-ups people might have with technology. And then the third one, and I put down both of them, is like, if they know people are going to watch the video, they might not answer honestly.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the accessibility issue. First of all, they are working to make the Flipgrid tool more accessible. That's an ongoing goal of. Is it the Learning Technologies Lab? Yeah, the Learning. Right, in St. Paul. And yes, in order to use this, you need a camera and a mic, which many of our students, but not all of our students, have access to. Another, I wouldn't call it a limitation of the tool, but it's simply how the tool functions. This is not a threaded discussion. You have people speaking out. They are not speaking to each other. And these are the kinds of things you take into consideration when you're trying to decide, well, is this for a discussion forum where people can engage in discussion together, or Flipgrid, which is just serving a very different kind of purpose. And I'm keeping an eye on the time here, but all I want to do is make sure that you've all. Rebecca, can I click on yours? Is that all right? All right, here we go. I want to make sure that you all just see and hear this.
I mostly am a support person. Getting faculty to use tools is a hit and miss type of opportunity. Sometimes they are comfortable exploring new challenges. Sometimes they prefer to use what they're comfortable with. I find that if we engage them in a way that makes them realize the outcomes, they're more likely to adopt new methods. Keeping them from focusing on the technology is important.
Thank you, Rebecca. Well put. Okay, so I'm watching the time, and Alex is going to step up and talk to us.
We probably should switch this thing. It's techno gadgetry. Oh, thank you. So one of the things that we wanted to note about Flipgrid is what do you do when you have an issue like we had today, where you only have 4 of your 30 or 40 students who participate in your Flipgrid, and it's day 1 of class. And you're trying to create a blended classroom where you have stuff happening online and you also have stuff happening in person, just like we had here. And one of the things for us to think about is how do we incorporate this Flipgrid piece, this one piece of technology, like the other pieces of technology, in creating a learning environment that works for our students in an ongoing way throughout the course. So since this was a workshop and we only have this 2-hour chunk of time together, we wouldn't have had students in a pattern already of doing some prep work for class, of going to check the Moodle site for links for things that they had to do. So for you, you all just kind of received an email out of the blue from us that you were signed up for this workshop and you should go do this thing. But in our classes, we wouldn't necessarily use the kind of strategy that we used today where we let you do the Flipgrid here. We wanted you to be able to use it and test it if you hadn't before. But in our classes, we would probably do something on the first day like this to make sure that students kind of knew what Flipgrid was and how to use it and that we could troubleshoot any technical issues. But then on the second day, it would be building off of or sequencing after the Flipgrid assignment. So you'd do the Flipgrid before class, and then you would come into class, and we would build off of it. So the expectation would be that you had done the Flipgrid, because if you hadn't, you wouldn't be fully ready for class that day. So on day 2, we would probably sequence it a little bit so that it wasn't too high stakes. Like if you hadn't done it, you'd still be able to participate. And by day 3 or 4, we would start making it harder and harder to participate if you weren't participating in the Flipgrid. So we'd have some time to troubleshoot and bring students in who weren't comfortable with the technology yet, but then we would actually start using the technology really seriously and give students the message that we weren't going to repeat stuff in class. So the blended learning piece is really important, but we're not going to do a repetition of the stuff that we did online when we come to class. So our hope for today is to think a lot in those terms, mainly around what are students learning in our courses, and then in what ways can digital technologies help build off of what students are learning. So today we built our workshop off of, you have a handout in front of you or online, we built our workshop off of the learning aims that are on the front of that page. So our goals for all of you when you're done participating in our workshop is that you can do the things that are right there. And in order to do that, we have a bunch of activities that we've scheduled, including the ones that you just did, that will guide you through a bunch of different learning experiences towards those eventual aims. Today we're probably going to do a little bit more talking than we otherwise would in our classrooms, and in part that's because we couldn't have you again preparing a lot of stuff before coming to class. But one of the things that we would have our students do is prepare stuff before coming to class so that we don't have to do a lot of the talking, and that our students can do a lot of learning together in small groups or using digital tools. Which we know help students learn significantly better than hearing us talk. So I wanted to start you with a quote. I work for an online journal of teaching and learning in the digital age that's called Hybrid Pedagogy. It's at hybridpedagogy.com, and Sean Michael Morris and Jesse Stommel are the founders of this journal, and they write a lot about digital pedagogy. And one of the things that they say that I always like to come back to when I think about digital pedagogy is that digital pedagogy gets confused a lot for being about using digital tools or a lot of digital tools coming into our learning environments or our classrooms. and that digital pedagogy is fundamentally and foremost about learning. And it's about learning in the digital age. But if we don't use the opportunity to turn to thinking about who's the person or the people in my class, who are the learners that are here, and what are they here to learn, and how is that learning going to happen, the technology tools that we're using don't make much of a difference between a blackboard and a textbook or Moodle. So we wanted to talk to you today about using technology as a modifier to the kinds of learning places and learning environments that we would otherwise be trying to set up. So we are looking at tech-enhanced learning spaces. Why is this not? Okay, I don't know why it's doing that. So we're talking about learning spaces first, though, not technology. And the learning spaces that we're really wanted to highlight here were the new ones that we have in STSS as of a couple of years ago that we call active learning classrooms, and that they're those spaces where students are increasingly turning away from classroom formats like this, where you're looking all up front at me, and moving towards classrooms where they're looking at a lot more at each other. And the person that's at the front of the room changes from being the person who tells them things and gives them knowledge to the person who is guiding and facilitating a learning experience. And then the technology that we're using, whether it's whiteboards or posters or the screens that you can see in the back with presentations on them, or our computers like you all have in front of you now, the technology becomes the kind of thing that can help us enhance the learning that's going on in our classroom. So in talking about learning spaces, we are using some of the research from the university here that Paul Bepler and J.D. Walker and Christopher Brooks are doing on how does learning happen in our active learning classrooms. And one of the things that they found is that underlying all good learning spaces is what they call an educational alliance. And that's these circles here. So mutual respect, shared responsibility for learning, cooperation, trust and security, and communication and feedback are the pieces of a relationship that we establish with our students as teachers and that our students establish with each other at the start of every classroom experience or online experience. And technology and pedagogy are the pieces that can help us facilitate the creation of this educational alliance, and then they use the educational alliance to create opportunities for learning. So I didn't mean to say, if I did, that technology doesn't help learning at all. Actually, technology can help learning in really significant ways, and one of the things that we know from a number of studies is that using blended learning, using any sorts of technology, and using them in the right sorts of ways actually can help student learning experiences, and almost always does, in fact. So here's some of the benefits that often happen when we use tech-enhanced learning. And you'll notice that they're not just about getting knowledge better, but they're often about creating more opportunities for interaction and relationship and peer interaction, where peers are teaching each other and working with each other. One of the things that I think is most powerful about tech-enhanced learning is the opportunity to create a learning culture in your classroom with a lot more communication between teachers and students between others, with other students. Oh, that would seem obvious, wouldn't it? So this was one of the original tech-enhanced learning spaces. The technology looked a little different, right? But you've got books in front of people, and then you've got the books at the front and a podium. So you have some sorts of technology that the classroom is relying on. And in a way, learning was shaped around the technology that was possible at the time. So this is in the 1300s. And one of the things that had to happen, of course, in learning was that there wasn't a printing press, and printing wasn't very available, so you had to write down what was in the professor's book. And you had to do it yourself. You had to transcribe your notes word for word from whatever the book that the professor had in front of you was. So technology has existed in classrooms for a long time, but the kind of learning that was going on in classrooms, we think, has really fundamentally shifted in the digital age. So where this kind of learning might have been necessary when information was really scarce and it was really difficult to transfer, now with digital tools around and with information all around us, now this is no longer necessary, but we still keep doing it. We still keep standing in front of lecture halls and talking with the understanding that students are somehow going to get something from us, rather than saying they have the PowerPoint already, now what can we do when we're in class together? I like also that this is from 1350. I like also that people are sleeping in this classroom too. So if we shift from that kind of classroom to the sorts of classrooms that we're now creating, these classrooms that use technology but fundamentally alter the way that we shape spaces for learning. Now we're moving from people learning how to transfer information to people learning how to think. And they're using all the tools that are available to them to learn how to think. And these spaces with the technologies, all the technologies that are in the room, are first and foremost about creating spaces for people to practice thinking together, to practice trying out ideas together, and really not about practicing transferring information. They really make it harder, a lot harder to do that. One of the students in these classrooms, there's a video link in the slides, and one of the students says something I really like. They say, these classrooms and the way that our teacher is working is allowing us to figure out things for ourselves and having the teacher there when we need help in order to guide us. And a faculty member who teaches in these classrooms said, the whole day is planned around what students can do so that they can learn what I think they need to know about this topic. I have taught several times in the Grad 8101 course, Preparing for Future Faculty, or I've taught once and taken the course and then worked in that course several times. And this is something one of our students in that class produced in the first couple of weeks of class. So changing the way that we're teaching, I think, doesn't take a whole lot of training. It really just takes a small shift of mindset, and our students within the first couple of weeks of class are dramatically changing the way they think about establishing their classrooms. And so the things that they're doing are moving from that teacher at the front of the room giving out the knowledge to the instructor as facilitator, from moving to what are the things that I want to make sure we cover, to what are the things I want my students to discover as they're part of our class. Moving from the passive collector of information to a discoverer of information. And I think one of the things most importantly that technology-enhanced spaces give us the opportunity to do is move from a collection of individuals in our classes to an independent group of interdependent group of peers and co-creators. And I want you to think for a second about any time that you've done something challenging with a group of people. One of the things that often happens in that kind of environment and that kind of experience is that you build closer relationships with people than you would have if you had just sat together and talked a little bit, or if you had sat facing me, right? And you have the ability then to do even more challenging things with each other the next time you come together. So I think about my experiences cooking for large groups of people. And I'm not a particularly experienced cook, but I really like cooking. And I do a lot of kinds of things where I end up cooking for large groups of people. But I oftentimes don't really know what I'm doing. I'm picking up a new recipe, or I'm picking up a new method for doing something. And I've got my previous experiences, but I really have to lean on someone else to teach me something about what I'm doing. But luckily, I've had some experiences in the past, and I can also teach people who are around me how to do the things that I know how to do and they don't. And so trying to accomplish something like that when we have a limited amount of time and we have an outcome that we have to get to, making all this food for a bunch of people who are going to eat it really soon, we're kind of forced to work together to figure it out. And figuring it out means that I remember those things a lot longer than I would if someone were to just tell me it or if I read it online on allrecipes.com. So I really like Frank Cofield's definition of learning. And I keep talking about learning because I just think it's really important. And I think we spend so much time talking about teaching and pedagogy and students that we don't really think about what learning is going on in our classrooms. And so I really like this definition of learning because it refers to significant changes in capabilities, understanding, knowledge, practice, attitudes, and values. And it excludes passing on information if it doesn't work towards those things. And I really like the idea of shifting from thinking about students in our classrooms to thinking about learners, where students are there to, we often talk about like students are just here to get a degree, right? Or like students want to get a good grade in my class, but that's all they really care about. And I really like shifting to classrooms and working in classrooms where we shift to the idea of learners as curious people who are interested in co-creating and collaborating and making knowledge together. And I have seen this happen over and over again in classrooms where we involve students a lot in doing work with each other. Does anyone know James Zull? He is a neuroscientist who thinks a lot about learning too. And one of the things that he does, that he talks about that I really like, and I'm not a neuroscientist, by the way, I don't know that much about neuroscience, but I have heard from neuroscientists that Zull is pretty good at representing some really complicated stuff about the brain in easy ways to understand that are still pretty accurate. But one of the things that Zull says is we spend a lot of time in the classrooms that we organize in traditional ways doing these two pieces of learning. And those are 2 of 4. So we spend a lot of time gathering data from PowerPoints, from books, from other slides, from whatever we're having students read and do homework on. And we spend a lot of time testing that data, either using tests or essays or anything like that. What we don't ask our students to do much is reflect in ways that connect what they're learning, these pieces, to their own previous experiences, or asking them to create, to make new hypotheses and come up with new ideas from the stuff that they've done here. So in an active learning classroom and in digital pedagogy, one of the things that we have the opportunity to do a lot is create these kinds of things. One of the things that you can do with Flipgrid, for example, is say, take what we just talked about in class this last time and think about an experience in your life where something similar to that happened in the past. And so one way of drawing a connection into reflection. Or come up with an idea for next class that you could test out using this knowledge that we just gained about chemistry. What would be the thing that you would test out next time that you're sort of still working on ideas about? So how do we do this learning thing? I don't know, how many of you have seen this kind of thing before? A few folks. So what we call this and how we do all this stuff, I think there's a huge amount of research in teaching and learning. And when I started reading about it, I was like, there's no way people have spent this much time thinking about this. How do they think about their own disciplines? But I started to realize there's a ton of this stuff, but people have done a lot of work to make it really simple to understand and really simple to practice. And so one of the things that I've found most powerful in redesigning my courses has been what we call aligned course design or backwards aligned course design. And basically what that means is taking those learning outcomes, like the ones that you have on that front page of that worksheet, and aligning all of the things that you do in class in a way that sequences and takes steps towards those outcomes. So what often happens in classes when instructors make syllabi is that they think like, okay, I want them to read this, and then I want them to tell me that they know about that in some ways, and then we'll be done. And the pieces often don't end up fitting together all that well, but they kind of look like they do. But I know from experience sitting on the campus connector that I oftentimes hear, or a lot hear, like that test had nothing to do with what we were talking about in class. Or students say things like, I feel like the teacher is just out to get me. Or like, I feel like we're not learning the stuff that we need to be learning to actually like be able to do something with this, right? And oftentimes I found that that comes from these pieces not fitting together very well. So what we do when we're trying to align a course is to get it so what I've experienced and heard from students is like, everything in this course like has a purpose. It's crazy. And students are like mind-boggled by the fact that that's happening. And I don't want that to ever actually happen. I want students to be like, if that doesn't happen, it's wrong. Like they should be complaining about that if that's not happening, because that's what every course at the university should be like. And I hate it when students come up to me and say, this is the best class I've ever had. And I say, I'm a doctoral student, it shouldn't be. Like you should have had incredible classes like time after time here, because it's not that hard, but we haven't invested the effort in it, but we could. So the tech-enhanced learning spaces that we're building, just to bring it back at the very end here, are building on all of this stuff about learning, and they're using these tools to create new spaces online and in online and in-person classes that give us the ability to take these kind of lessons about learning home with a lot more tools and to be more involved in students' lives in more ways that help us connect all the pieces of our course and all of that educational alliance I was telling you about more richly. Just wanted to show you really quick here. I really like, so there's a really nice video about these active learning classrooms. The link is in there. But I just wanted to show you this one part where they talk about like projects that they were working on in these classrooms, and I'm just like mind boggled by how smart these students sound.
More than you did.
One of the major assignments.
Why is it not there?
Is it not plugged in?
Use your microphone. Have it on the speaker.
Okay.
Assignments that students work on during the whole entire semester is a project that starts with a proposal. So we ask them to identify a problem of social value and to solve that problem using genes.
The region that makes it possible for this organism to transfer its genes into another organism is this virulence region here, which codes for proteins that excise.
We found that if the somatostatin gene is inhibiting myostatin, the muscle will eventually grow.
We wanted to reduce the amount of water used by cotton to increase drought resistance.
And they ultimately come to very interesting, very sophisticated, very important problems and viable solutions for it.
It was one of the key things that I liked about this class, is you were learning without really knowing that you were learning.
Students who say, you know, I learned how to ask questions and learn on my own and think about things. And that's what we really are aiming for. That's what makes teaching fun. It makes teaching in this kind of space really fun.
Hear the difference? So these are the how do I know where to start questions. And that's what we're hoping to do now with the rest of our time, is to tie in those pieces that we did at the start and then to connect it in with what are these tools, what are a couple of these tools that are available to us here, and how do they connect to how we build aligned learning experiences for our students. So I'm asking Farhad to come up and to get us started in identifying the challenges of critical pedagogy.
You're not going to that length just yet. You don't need it just yet.
For this next part, we're going to use a tool, again created at the University of Minnesota, called Chime In. I'm sure a lot of you have used it. How many have used Chime In before? A good number. What this does is allows you to poll your students, put up a question, and the students can answer that question either right in class or asynchronously over a period of time. And then you can show the results graphically. And this is sort of the instructor view of a poll. We'll come back to this in a little bit. And we'll come back to why we're doing this and why the questions are important. First thing I'm going to do is open a poll, the first one. That is to say, you guys can answer it. And I'm going to expand this out so you can see the questions. You can get to answering this poll by going to z.umn.edu/chime-in 2014. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to get there and answer this question. You can also, if you don't have a laptop or a smartphone or something like that, you can text your answer using a phone that just has SMS messaging. You can text the answer to that number out there. Text 12319 followed by A, B, C, or D, 1, 2, 3, or 4, that kind of thing.
What's the Z-link?
The Z-link again is chime in, one word, 2014.
There's nothing there. It says disallowed key characters.
Uh-oh.
I'm fine.
I'm fine.
Ha!
At 2014, you said?
Yeah. Did that work?
See here.
Yeah, 987. Refresh. Did any of you get in?
I have chime in here that I have bookmarked, but I'm trying to figure out where I'm supposed to type in the 2014.
I'm in Firefox, so Z.UMN.
z.umn.edu.
Android Firefox works great.
Chime in, one word, 2014. Yeah, we're in.
That might be a security something or another.
Anybody not get in? Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute to read over the question and answer it, and then we'll see what you guys answered. Refresh. It's underneath that. That's yeah, there we go.
Okay. Sorry, I can't read part of this. Is it chime
Go z.umn.edu. Z dot umn dot edu slash chime in 2014. And it's right there. Nice thing about this is if you go there on a mobile device, it presents you a interface that's specific to the mobile device. It's not just, you don't have to pan and zoom and pinch and that kind of thing.
It's funny because we're used to clickers.
Yeah.
Those of us with laptops,
Right.
picked up by cell phones.
And this is kind of an alternative to clickers. You could use clickers very well in this scenario, but we're using chime in here. Everybody in?
Colin.
What?
Nothing. Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Colin. Absolutely.
Colin McFadden.
Yes. Yeah. So actually we're using this guy, Colin McFadden's stuff that he wrote at the U in several different ways here. You've used that Z link that we keep saying Z this and Z that. That's a way to shorten a URL. He wrote that. And we use that a bunch of places. And then he wrote this chime in thing. And so we're using that here too. All right, everyone's done, right? All right, so we close this. And then I can click on the question. And it produces a kind of a graph, a kind of, well, various different graphical ways of looking at your result. So let's see what people thought. Nobody thought that it is worse, comparable or worse than face-to-face courses, right? The bulk of people thought that it's better than face-to-face or all online courses. And this is in fact what studies have shown. Now, if I was doing a flipped classroom methodology here, you would have gone off and read stuff and then come in and we would have polled you and looked at the graph. And typically, if over a half of the students don't get a concept, then the flipped classroom model says, well, we'd get you together in groups of 2 or 3 and talk about it. Find someone who disagrees with you and try and convince that person who disagrees with you off your viewpoint as to why that's so. And usually what happens is the person with the correct answer or persons can convince their peers why the answer is correct. And this is a much more powerful experience for the student than the instructor telling them the reasoning for this. For some reason, when their peers talk to them, they talk in a special language that instructors can't do.
Twin language.
Yeah. Okay. So we won't have you huddle in groups of 2s and 3s because you've assimilated the fact that it's better than the hybrid course model produces better outcomes, or at least as good outcomes as face-to-face traditional classes or all online. So take home, we're kind of doing a couple or 3 take-home messages here that should just stay with you because they're kind of accepted principles of pedagogy and digital pedagogy right now. And that is one. The hybrid course is better than others. Okay. I'm going to close this poll, and I'm going to open another one. What is active learning? And I'll expand it out so you can see the questions. This is not a multiple choice kind of question. Your screens should have updated, and if they didn't update, you could refresh them, and they should update with this other question. And it's free response, so you can type whatever you like in there, a sentence or 2 or 3, or just some words that reflect your idea of what active learning is. Active learning has a lot of buzz, and want to see what you guys think that means. Did folks get there? Did your screens update? Just refresh. So just tap in there and hit. No, this is Flipgrid.
Yeah, I know. I think I put it down.
Okay. Everyone done? Need another 30 seconds? Did you do the texting thing? Or did you do... It should have given you a text box to fill in your answer. All right, let's see what people said. Okay, so up there is a word cloud at the very top that words that people have used the most are bigger. You've all used or seen word clouds in various places. And what Chime-In also does is shows you each person's individual response, so you can actually read it and see the words in context. Active learning, yeah, it's big about learning. I guess everyone said active learning is active. Students, work, interaction. Read through the answers real fast. Making it more interactive by allowing students to work in groups. Participatory group learning, sure. Required to participate in the topic under discussion. Creation of knowledge. Works on a project, activities or discussion, apply, learn through doing. Yep. So active here means instead of listening to somebody passively or viewing a video passively or something like that, you are actually interacting with creating something or interacting with something. And this produces deeper learning than more passive forms of pedagogy. So I think you all are there. That's sort of a second take-home message. If you have a class, try and skew it towards a more active learning where they actually do things rather than listen. This question has to do with the flipped classroom. Your browser should have updated, and if they haven't updated, you can refresh them, and they should. The flipped classroom is another pedagogical technique or method that's received a lot of buzz in the last few years. This concerns what you think the flipped classroom, what are the salient things that make a flipped classroom or flipped pedagogy work? How do you do it? Everyone in? Well, most everybody thinks it's all of those things. They may watch lectures that are recorded. They may do required readings, both of those. In class, they spend time doing things that require the higher orders of learning. So analysis, synthesizing, creative stuff, having done the reading, accumulation of content or knowledge at home. And the last one is a little less well known. Students flip roles with instructors. This is just another way to say typically a well-executed flipped classroom should involve some peer teaching. So it's more powerful if during the class, during the class time, students can interact with each other. Students can talk to each other, teach each other a concept, things like that. So you guys all are all over this. You know that the flipped classroom is good and it produces better learning outcomes than a lot of other pedagogies, certainly more than a lecture. And here are the concepts, the ideas that go into creating running one of these. Oh, let's close that poll. Come on. Okay, there we go. Open. And last question with the sort of 3 or 4 strong take-home messages in pedagogy here that we want you to take back. This one talks about interactions. We've mentioned active learning, activity, students talking to each other. Interaction is big in modern pedagogy. This asks what interaction is most important? Least important, okay. Which is least important? Student-teacher, that interaction? Student to student, is that the least important, or is student to content? This should be easy too. All right, I guess everyone's answered. That was an easy question. Well, it was kind of split a little bit here. That's good. I see there's some disagreement. There's at least half of the people. Oops. Almost half of the people thought that it's either student-teacher or I won't ask you to discuss this among yourselves. We'll discuss it right now. The studies have shown, there was a study done by Bernard, which was a meta-study. They collected a whole bunch of studies where interactions were important between student and teacher, or student and content, or student to student. And what they discovered was that the least important interaction is the student-teacher one, which is kind of bruising to your ego if you're an instructor or a professor, that what you're saying up here is the least important thing in learning.
But it's also content. So
Pardon?
What a lecture presents is also content.
Mm-hmm.
What a lecture presents is also content, so it's hard to distinguish between which the interaction is in the case of a lecture.
Right, right. It's certainly content, but it also includes interactions between the instructor and the student one-on-one. And what they found was the student-student and student content were really important. They're terribly important. While the student-teacher part,
But, and I don't know the Bernard study, that presupposes, it seems to me, a sort of didactic kind of relationship, not necessarily constructivist facilitator relationship that we previously described, or Alex previously described, which is more of a co-creator type of relationship. Or I would at least be interested if Bernard looked at those various teaching models.
I think this study is the one I didn't have on your handouts, but I will add it to the handout, and you guys can, you know the URL to the handout, and you can look at it yourself. It looked at a lot of different studies, and I think it specifically looked at not lecture, but instructor-student interactions.
Okay.
So,
I was thinking that too.
Yeah.
You have the facilitator walking around and they're approachable and help you think, think about an issue more, help facilitate that discussion with them.
right, a one-on-one Socrative method, that kind of thing. That's less important than these other two.
There was also a comment online that says, aren't they all important?
They're all important, of course, but the most important are these, and that's sort of the take-home message, and I'll add that study to the list. So these are like 3 or 3.5 principles that you guys are all over already, and just want to send you home with these. Now we'll have Lauren in the next part. Go back to here and close this poll, and we'll open this poll asking about Google Apps, which is what Lauren is going to talk about, a specific part of Google Apps. And we're curious to know how many of you use Google Apps and in what capacities. So I'll give you a second, and then we look at that, and then Lauren can talk about Google, the U of M Google Groups and Google Apps as a tool.
Can you open the poll?
Oh, didn't I? Sorry. There.
There's no all of the above.
Ah.
Most often.
Most often. There we go.
Can't handwrite E, all of the above underneath.
If you were a good hacker, you might be able to do that.
See, we're learning things already.
A lot of committee work, my goodness. Teaching and learning, not too many in research. That might reflect the crowd here. Do you want to bop back to Chrome?
Yeah, please. Okay, and since I'm having a Z-Link malfunction, thank you, Father. I'm just going to quickly create a document for us to get into. So I did want to know, though, how many of you create Google Groups or participate in Google Groups to help you get your work done? A lot of you, okay. So there's going to be no particular magic to this, but regardless, I want to make some points. Let's just create a document. So if you've created the Google group, then you know that one of the, let's see now, wait a minute, dash. And share with others. There we go. You know, the power of creating these Google groups is that you can easily share documents with many, many people with one click. So here I'm simply adding the name of the Google group, Digital Pedagogy, and now I'm going to push it out to you so that you've got access to this. All right, so that should be on its way to you. And I expect then, sorry, internal. Let's try that again. I've definitely been anticipating a lot of quirks in Google, not just today, but over the last few days.
Did they just update Drive?
Was that it? In fact, we had. So how
The
are?
document did come to me.
It did?
Yeah,
No kidding.
despite it just saying that it wasn't working.
Okay.
I was able to get it up.
Super duper. There it is.
So if you're in Google Drive, you just jump to your incoming folder on the left.
Yeah, but let's start with the discussion. Again, we're going to do this small groups. If you are plugged into discussion around digital pedagogy or the scholarship around digital pedagogy, then you're aware that there's actually a lot of ambivalence around engaging digital tools in support of teaching and learning. A lot of faculty would like a kill switch in the classroom so that they can cut off your access to a cell phone or a laptop. Somebody in the Flipgrid mentioned that one of the big headaches of using digital technologies is, guess what, they don't always work when we need them to work. Yeah, amen to that. That's absolutely right. So yeah, we're going to conduct a little exorcism here. Have a conversation around, what kind of ambivalence or anxiety or challenges do you associate with actively engaging digital tools in teaching and learning? So have that conversation. We're going to make this really quick and did you all get access to that document? Just create a list in there. Come up with ones that feel significant to you and make a list, please. And I'm even going to set my timer for 5 minutes. Get it all out. Don't hold back.
Raise your hand and I'll come help.
Ah, okay. So you should have gotten an email that gives you the... And also if the person next to you has access, then you're fine.
You didn't get the mail.
So I didn't get emails on this.
Okay, Lauren, can we add someone to the group?
I can do it.
Yeah.
I'm in there already. I got it.
My timer.
Okay, you should be in now.
That's still leaving you around.
What's that?
That Google Groups thing is nifty.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's absolutely nifty. These guys all know it, but we still talking into a mic.
be able to experiment within your classroom setting. So there's a sort of, chicken and egg kind of thing that goes on as well. And then your appreciation for the use of the technology is also ever evolving as you adapt your teaching styles. So that's it's very delicate. Where'd you get those jeans from? J. Crew's stylist. Yeah. I lost a bunch of weight and now it doesn't fit anymore. I feel like I'm hammer pants now. Sorry. Sorry. I need pants. They're like dad cheese. Yeah. Anyways, you're just as distracted without time. No, I think there's something to be said though. I mean, I had a colleague of mine when I was involved in international study. He said, "What advice would you give me?" And he said, "Put the computer away when you're in a meeting. You're there to make, you're there to connect people." Well, and that was the response from another colleague that was there.
I get really, really annoyed when I'm teaching and I'm talking to somebody on the computer because obviously tells me and they're not engaged. I will get emails from people.
So I tried to close the lid and take out my notebook sometimes. My notebook.
Okay, everybody, here is your next challenge. You had a lot to say about the challenges involved with engaging digital pedagogy and technologies. I hope you got that all out of your system, because your next challenge is to put your heads together, and I want you to identify at least some of these that you can reframe as an opportunity. Find the challenge, reframe that as an opportunity, and engage the text either by dropping a comment in next to a line, or you could also just continue the sentence and change the color of the font that you're using, okay? All right, and we're going to take 3 minutes, so focus and identify at least some. 3 minutes.
The challenge is turning into an opportunity.
That just means add your thoughts and find a way to make it visually distinct, whether you drop a comment in or just change the color of the text you're using.
It changes the relationship. It's active and engaging, or it can facilitate active. So how do you frame that?
What was your opportunity? I said what I heard you say.
No, not that one. Where is it?
That's an opportunity. That's how I used to bring up my faculty. It's a really good opportunity to learn how to use it. You'll be ahead of the curve with students. They usually take a much more seasoned faculty member to teach them first, because then I have that opportunity to do less seasoned faculty members.
Provide opportunities for students to act more like researchers in the classroom. It provides authentic learning experiences. There's my $10 work. Very applied authentic learning experiences.
One more minute.
And what faculty member doesn't want their students to think like researchers? Like they think.
So let's talk about this. First of all, do you ever get over the thrill of watching a whole bunch of people edit a document like this? I mean, isn't it just? It's cool. It's absolutely cool, and it generates a lot of energy. And of course, these new technologies and the new practices and the new roles, I guess, and responsibilities that they move us toward, of course, that creates some ambivalence and anxiety because they disrupt the rituals and the practices that we associate with a more traditional classroom. And yet, we can find the opportunities. Anybody have some examples that they want to call out of this list? Yes.
One thing that I called out was the opportunity for doing a universal design approach to a course versus doing a traditional lecture method, that you can make your course more accessible for all of your students and students with different learning styles. So it's a really good opportunity to just make your class more interesting for everybody.
I appreciate that, because we all know that people, for those of us who support faculty and instructors, they come to us because of a challenge with a tool, but that's the beginning of a conversation around practices, right, and pedagogy. So it's like a foot in the door to some terrific conversations and an opportunity to rethink our approaches. So other examples of finding the opportunity in the challenge. Were you going to say something?
Well, so I sort of kind of reading my own response, but the idea that if there's a problem with being driven to distraction, there's the possibility that, I mean, like, it's established already via studies that most students aren't even paying attention for very long periods of time during lectures anyway, so technology might actually offer a way to better function with the ebbs and flow of human attention if you know how to use it right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to put an example on the table? You found the opportunity and the challenge. Scott.
The person who said coming up with a rubric or grading a digital a group assignment, I suggested that actually is a great opportunity to revisit your learning objectives and to become more adept at assessment and understanding of the value of the digital technology so you can adapt for future classes.
Yeah, so technology simply requires of us more precision around planning, around communication with our students, and all of that can only lead to better learning outcomes and a better experience for our students. Yeah, and I want to suggest a challenge also. I mean, faculty always express the concern about losing the immediacy and the intimacy of this kind of face-to-face engagement. And I think we can all appreciate that. There's nothing like the energy around a classroom discussion when it goes well. And it's hard for them to let go of that often in an online environment. But think of the opportunity around the digital artifacts that we create in the online environment when we get into discussion forums or when we are contributing through Flipgrid, something like that. The online environment requires that we are communicating via these digital artifacts, and that opens up opportunities for reflection, rethinking, assessment, sharing in different ways. Yeah, please.
But it also opens up the opportunity for an incredible increase in volume.
Yes.
How do you manage that? That's one thing that still concerns me.
Right. Right.
So that was an incredible increase in volume.
Yes. Good point. I mean, look at, we've been together now for an hour and a half, and look at all of the data that we have generated as a group. It's pretty extraordinary to imagine that you can be harvesting this kind of data and using it over the course of continued engagement with students in a class. And that's one of the things that we wanted to reflect on and sort of demonstrate in this environment. So as you say, you put on the table, well, what do we do with it then? And that again has to do with your learning outcomes and what you want to achieve. Did you look like you're leaning in to say?
Another thing that you can do to manage the increase in volume is to really think about, like, what are we doing with these things as the course goes on to, like, what are we producing these artifacts for? So one of the things that I often do with my students is where we work through various bits of content over the course of the semester, and we do collaborative note-taking as a way of gathering data about each one of those pieces, and then we come back to them. So instead of me creating lecture notes for my students, we create the lecture notes together, and then we come back to them as resources over the course of class. So whereas this becomes something where now Lauren and Farhad and I could come back to this and look at, like, okay, what are people taking away, and what, if we came back to class next time, would we want to address and work on? This document might be as much for us or more for us than it would end up being for you in the end. We might create documents too that would then be for, or other pieces of information that would then be for students to take away from class. And I love the Google Groups feature, because my problem with the volume is, like, where do all these documents go? And when my students are creating these Google Drive documents, like, they disappear and I can't find them, and yeah, that part becomes difficult. And the Google Groups piece gives us one really nice way of organizing it.
Yeah, and to follow up on that Google Groups piece, one thing I wanted to point out to you is you can now request a Google group to be associated with your class, your credit-bearing class, so that this becomes an easy way of communicating with your students, of archiving that communication with your students, and of sharing, not just sharing content with your students, but easily creating a space where your students can create the content. So great to know. And Peg, I'm just wondering if you have anything that you want to add to that, since you've really had your finger on the pulse around that move toward Google Groups being available to classes. I put you on the spot, but
no, that's okay. We had quite a few sessions on that when I was back in the Moodle world, and I think people are really apprehensive, and yet they still want a place to store things. But I think it's a learning curve and a little bit of a culture change, and so the more we can get out and share with faculty and share with students and get them using that,
What are people anxious about? What difference does it make to be moving our content from that password-protected Moodle environment into Google Drive? Is that part of what people are nervous about?
I think so, because like part of it was YouTube. You know, they don't really understand that they can change those privacy settings for that video. You know, we've had lots of these discussions too. It's like, well, where should stuff be? But, you know, if you look at it out there, just efficiency wise, it's free to put it out on Google for now, at least. You know, I'm always a little apprehensive about the long term of some of these vendors, but it's just a culture shift. I think people are used to putting things on their desktop. They can see it. Right. They feel like it's with them all the time. And maybe when it's in the cloud, you can't access it as readily as you could, you know, if it were, you know, on your local hard drive. But it's changing. You know, I think more and more people are using it. But the easier we can make that, and plus, like within Moodle, if you have, you know, the options to save, if it's I think that'll change as each new version comes out. Like as we start looking at Moodle 3 next winter, I think that'll be a lot better and easier.
Yeah,
I don't know if
thanks.
that's answering the question, but it's lots of good discussion.
Thanks for chiming in. So we are wrapping up now, and you wanted to make some comments, right?
Yeah, just before we get to that, on those the handouts that you all have, one of the things that we just wanted to point out in there was that, and this is something to do with this Google Groups piece too, like all these digital technologies, there are a lot of them. They are always changing, and they make many of us, including myself, nervous that when I try this in my class, it's not going to work, and I have that like critical time to catch my students' attention each time at the start of class, and I'm going to miss it because we spent 5 minutes messing around with trying to get the technology stuff to work. Like one of the things that has helped me a lot is to know that I don't need to know all of these technology pieces, but to know that like at the center of my course is learning and thinking about learning, and then I'm building technology pieces on top of that to help assist in that. So I happen to use a lot of Moodle. I've tried Flipgrid a little bit. I really use Google Docs a lot. But other classrooms are doing other things, and whatever is kind of like working for you is good, as long as I kind of say as a rule, I try like 1 or 2 new things each semester. So like coming away from a workshop like this where I've learned something new, I often will go like, okay, what's the new thing I'm going to try tomorrow? And I make that a really small thing. What's the new thing I'm going to try next semester where I have some time to plan? And what's the thing that I'm going to try next year that I can start leading up to now as I do my planning cycle for the next year coming around? And the other piece that's on there are what are the analog tools that are like these too, because those are technologies as well, and let's not like lose those because all these cool digital things are here. All the things that we've done in this room we could have done with analog technologies too. The piece that Lauren just did on the Google Drive account like is really cool because we have a record of it and we have a shared record that everyone has access to. But if we were all in the same room together, we could have used sticky notes and we could have put them up around the room. Or if we had whiteboards in here, we could have used the whiteboards together. So all of these can kind of degrade to analog systems. And I've been trained to think about that now because I had a colleague who came from a different country somewhere in southern Africa and was saying like, look, these technologies are really great, but the students that I work with don't have them. And I was like, okay, well, that's also a problem here. That's not a problem somewhere else. It's a problem here, and it's a problem in many of the communities that folks work in, either at the U or off campus. So how do we deal with that? And I've tried to figure out how can this activity that I've done work in a different setting with different technologies. So we've tried to offer up some thoughts about like analog technologies that you could also use. So as we're coming into the end here, we wanted to do one final thing to bookend, to draw our class together, or our workshop together, which we call a classroom assessment of teaching, or a CAT. And the idea, returning back to that aligned course design piece, is how do we know that what we've done today is something that you can now apply in your work and life going forward. And so it's a way of gathering information for us as facilitators to know, did we accomplish what we set out to? It's a way for all of you to sit and reflect for a second about like what did I get? And really for those, like this was me as an undergraduate student, I was always thinking, how did those other students have such good questions? I haven't had time to even think about what my questions are yet. So this is the time for those of us who are introverted processors or who take a few extra minutes to process, to have an opportunity to reflect personally and to write something down and then to bring it back into class. I'll bring it back as the instructor into class the next time we meet, either as a PowerPoint slide that shows how people responded, or as something that I say at the beginning, or as an activity that I do or change because of what people said. So in this case, we have put out in front of you, to do the analog and the digital, we've put out in front of you note cards that you can write on. And for our folks that are on UM Connect, we have a form that you can use, a Google form, so one more technology in our Google group here that's called, is at z.umn.edu/form that you can use as well. So you can choose the technology that you want to use to respond, but just write down one thing you've learned from today, one thing you might start changing your mind about, and one big question that you still have. And we'll take maybe 3 minutes to do that.
Can we make this form public, not just the U of M folks?
Yes. Be good, Justin. Okay. If you haven't already, now would be the time to move into that one big question you've still got with you, or that you've got with you now as a result of what we've talked about. Take about 30 seconds to finish up if you haven't already. So this is the time in our workshop where Farhad does the DigiPed slide. You ready? He's not doing it. So typically we wouldn't do this in, or I wouldn't often do this anyway. I shouldn't speak for Farhad and Lauren, but I wouldn't do this in my class right away. If we did something like chime in, I would do that because student answers can be anonymous really easily. In here, your answers are anonymous too, although I could have asked you to submit them with your names attached. This is basic Google, like a Google form. What's cool is you can send this out through the Google group that Lauren had created. So you can use this to poll your students and you can keep the responses in one place. So I will often just do note cards because they're fast and I can stand at the door and like say goodbye to my students as they leave and grab their note cards. And it's a way of like, if someone wants to follow up with me, that's a time that they can do that too. But with this, it's kind of nice because I can have all these answers in one place and I can actually read them, which is oftentimes not the case with writing, depending on how people write. But here I would actually probably take these and put them in a PowerPoint slide so people could see kind of like a summary of what people said. But we wanted to just take the last couple minutes that we have here to talk through any other questions that we had. So I'm going to take these questions that folks listed, and I'm going to probably lean on you actually you all to answer these. Because I think there's a couple in here that were really good, like kind of technical questions, but I don't actually know the answers. Does anyone know, is there a central place where digital tools are listed on campus?
Dash site, sort of. If there's so one of those places is the dash site, z.umn.edu/dash. If there's not something on there, tell me, and I will put it on there.
And Justin, maybe there's another one here for you too. We're still pretty distributed in our support with pockets here and there doing cool stuff. What are the options for those of us wanting to stay connected?
Dash site, I'm half kidding. So we have, these groups that have been set up for this. There's some informal meetups happening. I think it's always a challenge at a place like this to try and stay connected with so many different people doing so many different things. So I think, just keeping in touch with the different people, whether the folks who presented today, myself, other people in CLIOIT, like Rebecca Moss, who's sitting in the room there, and just trying to keep in contact and keep coming to, events like this or conversations. I think folks, in the Center for Teaching and Learning are doing stuff with this all the time. So just trying to maintain activity with this work. There are, if you find those pockets, they know about other pockets too, and kind of keep building those bridges together. So.
What's ironic is I wrote that question.
So Rebecca wrote that question, thereby undercutting my entire argument.
Yes. I think that first question is a really important one too. Lauren just brought that up. How do you deal with the technology gaps in a single classroom? Super important. And one of the things that I do and that all of us did today was we all brought all the devices we own. So if I was if I was teaching and I had a bunch of students who didn't have devices, I would go and like bring my laptop, my iPad, my phone, and hand them out to students. And I prepped mine beforehand, so I turned off all the notifications and stuff, so my students aren't getting my personal messages, but so that someone could use it. The other option is to have us do like we did and have people pair up who do have technology access. But I would be curious what others are doing as well.
First of all, you want to be very clear about what technology skills your students would need in this environment, and make sure that assignments are clear as to how students submit that kind of thing. So there's a certain amount of support that you need to offer so that students have a successful experience if they're engaged in your Moodle site, something like that. But keep in mind that there are a lot of resources that you could give them access to. There are student resources for Moodle, so they can take responsibility for watching these videos, or learning the self-learning available to them. There's lynda.com, and if you identify specific skills that your students should have in order to be successful in your class, then identify those lynda.com videos, and again, make them available through your Moodle site. And also, as Alex said, creating a culture of just cooperation and mutual support, because students like to flex their muscles and show off their own skills. So let them help their peers. Anybody else have other strategies for helping students?
I was just saying you could schedule your class into a computer lab if you knew that there was 1 or 2 days that you wanted to use the technology.
And to what extent is the technology itself part of the course content, so that you're not sort of wasting time on doing it? You're here to learn Moodle, or you're here to learn this tech, as well as the other stuff in the course.
Got to be clear about that. If the technology, the media, et cetera, is part of the learning outcomes, then you will be scaffolding that experience, very, very specifically.
One of the things that CLA is interested in producing, and I hope we'll have lots of others that might be interested in doing this too, is creating short courses that will help with digital literacy, basically. And not just for faculty, but I'm thinking students, so that they will understand what Google Groups offer, what Google Docs are how to use Moodle, how to do all those sorts of things, so that the faculty member isn't having to instruct students on how to use tools for the first couple of weeks of class. And all of the students are having to learn from all the various faculty. In other words, it's getting everybody up to the same level, and it's something that students can do on their own. And so, if we create all of these wonderful short courses, then it's a way for us to focus on not on the tool, but on what we need to do with those tools.
And along those lines, faculty can always lean on the support services that we have. I mean, with the Smart Learning Commons, but you've got, media services and CLA and et cetera. So there's specialized software and equipment and expertise across campus that their tuition dollars are paying for.
Earlier point, as we're adapting to new virtual spaces, think about adapting a syllabus for that environment. A syllabus probably should, at this point, include a section on the technologies that students are going to be engaging in order to be successful in the class. So that's one place where students can go for information.
And syllabus and on Moodle.
Right. O'clock. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been a pleasure to spend the time with you, and thanks to our online folks.